Well, hello. Welcome to the Process Guild. And today we prioritize critical ambassador activities and cover process changes, if anything that needs to be addressed. We're gonna have like a around 60-minute session. At least usually it's been around that. We upload the session to YouTube as always now as uncut. Oh, actually, Treasury Code goes uncut, but the Process Guild, I do little edits there if we play around with sticky notes or stuff. I remove that quiet time. So where agendas usually come, always I try to keep the pipeline as a Discord channel. May start thinking different tools because it feels like I'm filling it up, although maybe it also feels like everything is going in the direction that it should go. So I don't know, is it good or bad thing yet? Regarding this nice white area, so you can see I've started getting more and more these blue arrows. One new addition I added is I'm gonna at some point go back in time also and add these blue sticky notes. So what they're gonna do is basically take you to the latest item, and if you see it as a green, then it's completed task. So if you would look at that as in T-work, it's like done tasks. And yeah, one of the things I would want to start going through is basically this backlog. We look at new tasks and projects, we see how they're going and how do we position them in backlog. Basically, quick consensus, no voting, I guess, is needed here at the start, perhaps a priority like later. Then there was like a bunch of upcoming activities from last week and some from Discord. So let's see where we can move them and basically plan our next week of discussions, or already kind of archive them in a way that is suitable for us. And yeah, that's the flow I'm going with. There is going to be something I have to remember which I forgot. So, but I think when we go through this process, I'll remind again. But yeah, keeping the opening as we usually have. Does anybody in the call wants to bring up some upcoming activities or ideas that in Process Guild we definitely should discuss and wasn't mentioned in Discord Process Guild channel, or you don't see it in the list of? Anyway, so yeah, let's start. So things which we did: Archival Workgroup. So we had like a proposal session, like incubation. Perhaps Stephen wants to share output from incubation workgroup, and then from Treasury budget side, I think it was a great session. And if nobody, like if this mission information was shared, I'm not sure how town hall went. Like, were there any sentiment that this should be looked over again? And if not, then from Thursday, basically, for basically next week, we can consider Archival Workgroup tasks to be rewarded up to that specified amount.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I took the Archival Workgroup proposal to Incubation Workgroup, so I will leave it to that workgroup to report on that. From my perspective, it seemed to be quite positive, and I mean, I suppose it was just like I'm not sure how the Incubation Workgroup, whether they come to a conclusion or not, whether it's just ideation, but they seem to be just fine, you know. And then it could go on to the Treasury Guild workshop, which was the kind of evolving process for a new work group. That's my impression anyway.
I can give a little recap. I can paraphrase from my recap at the end of incubation last week, like summing up some of the thoughts that the community had. That it's a good proposal, but the thing necessary to move forward is kind of uh how do we come to consensus, or how does that process move through? There seemed to be like uh a warmth to the proposal. It was well received, although there were some questions which were raised about, for instance, the intellectual property or the Creative Commons licensing and things like yeah, things related to this. I've written in this document now. uh I'll pull it. I'll pull it out of the backlog. Um, I wrote there. It's like voting, consensus, consent, decision making in the ambassador program, and I think that was one of the conclusions from the incubation, that there needs to be a kind of process set out, which is kind of uh, which we can move forward with. I think that Stephen especially raised some great concerns about voting, which were echoed by like Thoughts of Grace and others last week. And I think that yeah, perhaps it could warrant some focus to work out exactly what we do with improving our techniques, um having voting, not having voting, the possibilities of that, delegating this to a smaller amount of people, and anonymous voting, and kind of putting that into practice. Like, do we put that into practice across the whole program, or do we enable work group leads to adopt it if they wish? Yeah.
Interesting.
I
Because
mean,
it's funny that how do we move this proposal forward? In my view, this proposal is now accepted to be implemented through this one last week. And although there was no explicit voting, but that's the thing where I was like, do we find the consensus there? Like, hey, I don't know which is right now. I always keep missing up what the difference of consent and consensus. But there was no, like right now, no backlash on, wait a second, we should talk about this before we can approve it. There was even budget allocation, understanding both sides were like, yep, seems a good start. And now how it moves forward is we're gonna see results, and probably in 2 months we can, like, or 1 month, where basically we come back to the drawing board and see like, where are these results reflected? With our Archival group, I guess that would be more simpler, because you can see the asset itself, and it's like less untangible than most of our work, like maintaining these connections and preparing sessions, or like different things that you cannot really see.
yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there's two things here. There's the process of creating a new work group, and then there's the comment on the proposal. So if there's any comments on the proposal itself, could people comment on the proposal? That would be good. They could do that, because otherwise that's going to get lost. I was kind of not clear about that, because my understanding, it goes to incubation, it's discussed there, assessed, some sort of decisions made, hopefully, and it goes to Treasury Guild where a budget is allocated. So is that happening? If not, what is happening?
Didn't the proposal already move to Treasury Guild to be discussed last week and meant to?
Yeah, it did. So I suppose, but now we're at Process Guild, so we're kind of, I suppose, at this point we begin to agree on the process. Is that right? So we've kind of done a test of the process, which was, okay, a new work group sets up, they do draft a proposal, they take it to the incubation work group comment and discuss the process, the work group proposal. There's a bit of ambiguity about whether a decision is made there. So maybe we need to, I'm not sure where we go with that. But as you say, it kind of was tacitly agreed, and then it went on to Treasury Guild, where there was an agreement on some budget allocation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So what happens right now, for example, in this code, every purple task is going to be a load on something that we track basically. And if you say archival work, like to me, my question, actually, I put it done. So we completed archival workgroup journey to 1 week. This was highlighted. Hey, we need to kind of figure out how do we get this. And we basically had an iteration. However, do we want to go back and start refining more of these proposal processes? Okay, what happens next? So this is something what you now described as a new thing. How I think we maybe have somewhere that.
I think the questions I had are related to the process and not directly linked to last week's incubation of the archival work group and the decisions related to that. I think
I think you were mentioning the open source licensing and all that.
so. Sorry, say again. I didn't hear you.
The open source license aspect, that relates to the proposal.
The open source. Sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring.
You mentioned that when you did a recap of the incubation work group, that you had some concerns about open source licensing.
Oh no, I said IP.
And IP. That relates to the proposal, does it not?
Sorry.
Yeah, and IP, intellectual property. So doesn't that relate to the proposal?
That I guess relates to the implications of the proposal related to people's contributions in the ecosystem and what happens, yeah, like the Creative Commons license and what that means, onboarding people into that process and making people understand. Yeah,
so it's
yeah?
a yes then. Yeah.
What's the binary question?
I'm trying to establish how comments are made on a proposal for a work group and what the distinction is between commenting on a work group and designing a process for a work group.
Well, right now we have no clue about it. And so I think we may have to bring this up for another there's a proposal roadmap, because we did kind of go through, okay, you're now in the stage of approval, and basically it's a rundown to execution. So who audits the proposal? We right now have no audit. And so it's in my world, your proposal is now actually done. Now it's just up to your contribution to keep it the intent alive. However, I'm aware and like that there are people who think differently and look at assets in different ways. So coming back to the proposal and refining and improving that is, I think, and also a strategy that could be looked at. And
yeah, again, my understanding, again, people may differ, is that partly because there was a budget apportioned in principle, that would only be apportioned upon delivery of outcomes. And that was where the reporting would come in from a process perspective. So I set up an infrastructure for that. So once, for example, one outcome might be, for example, setting up bi-weekly meetings, for example. So I would need to say, I'm planning for that to happen. But before the budget is paid, that people will need to be satisfied that has happened. you know, from a process perspective. Is that what you're getting at, Tiva?
So the way it kind of works right now is that you provide a task, like a recognized contribution, and right now we use Dwork, or if you want to do an alternative way, GitHub task painting, then I guess, yeah, coming back to the Treasury Guild, and right now basically me, so or Miro or Andre, to kind of get that information into that standard format, and you basically have the budget up to something to spend. And yeah, and this is where it is. Like, we are looking at each other. We are on the same team. We can see, that's the thing of transparency. And when we kind of iterate every week and see what's happening, where is like resources spent, this is going to be educating ourselves. And from these downsides, oh well, this didn't went well, like you now just allocated into one task, like all the rewards, I don't know how much it is, like 2000 AGX, and so that you save yourself time of reporting all these nuanced activities, then we can start like, okay, some thoughts for principles. Although it's nice to be proactive, but in another way, there was a bit of a vetting process here too, that that you, like a random person doesn't get the power of all that finances that we share.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tracking everything. All the GitHub tasks are linked into Dwork. So I suppose that's the question here is, what level of detail do you want, you know, and how is that going to fit into a process for a work group? How should work groups report on their progress or their outputs?
I guess let's start from do a report and then we see does it work. Because right now the reporting we are doing is basically meeting summaries, I think.
But can we not just like it's great, can we get some responses from other people? We really value your like what you say to your vote, but yeah.
I would like to add that well, I feel like for different work groups, the system for documenting or reporting could be a bit different. I mean, from the writers work group perspective, as I think we can show our articles, or we can, you know, blog posts or any write-up or whatever. And for the video work group, there will apparently be videos to show. So I guess for the Archival work group, it's a question of its own specific indicators. So, and I guess if Stephen could do maybe you know, give us an overview of 3 months or 2 months down the line, what we could be, you know, what that the like actual visuals that we can expect from the Archival work group. I guess that would actually go a long way, you know, and then we can actually start thinking of other things that we can also like look forward to see from the Archival work.
In my mind, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking from the archival perspective, it's pretty difficult to track the tasks. It's such a new work group versus the writers work group and the video work group. It's pretty streamlined and pretty visible what was done and how it's affected everything. But the archival work group is it's good luck, Stephen. You got a task on hand here.
Well, in my mind, it's relatively
Because
simple.
to me,
Let me copy paste from the proposal, because in my mind the proposal includes something on auditability, sorry, but it includes like track tasks on GitHub, integrate the the required task points on D work, and pioneer the idea of costing some work elements via cost per task, and integrate this with D work. In my mind, that's part of the proposal, and yeah, I'm not really seeing in my mind that's a perfectly acceptable way of reporting. Let's put it like that. But maybe that's too simplistic.
I think I would also like to add yeah, I think that's something that we can actually see that's quite visible enough. But I don't know if it feels more of like dedicated tasks to me, because I think the question I might have is okay, how exactly does it function, as a work group? Would there be a system, to teach more people how to archive? Like, how many people or how many hands on deck would Steven need for, his vision for the Archival work group? And because I'm very sure there might be people, in the future joining that might have experience with Gitbook and GitHub, Gitbook management. I have experience with GitHub myself, and I've played with Gitbook in a while, but I don't really see how it will how it will bring in more people to officially make it, a widespread work group. But if there's a way that we can actually understand it, like if maybe Steven can explain how that would work and what exactly these people would be doing. So that way we can actually we can scale it up and we can like have a more broad vision, and also so by the time more people come in to officially make it a work group, I think we can actually know how to track their own dedication or their own responsibilities and what they will be accountable for.
Yeah, okay. Have you read the proposal, Kenichi?
A bit of it, but I think it's been a while since I saw the proposal. Maybe if you can send it again.
It's in the Zoom chat. Well, by now it's
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable for someone who proposes a good work group for the proposal to be read by the people who are assessing it. And that has been done in the incubation work group. This is the process work group, which my understanding is defining processes, not assessing a proposal.
Yeah, you make a very valid point, Stephen, and I think it's right of you to bring back that focus.
That being said, while I fully agree, in practice, you have to keep in mind this is more or less the first proposal we have in this type of way of dealing with it. So that's what is the distinction of which work group does what is accurate. I think also by nature it will kind of flow here and there. Perhaps.
Absolutely, Peter. That's, you may have noticed I'm putting this to the test. Yeah, so I don't pretend that we have everything fine. I'm acting as though we do have a process, I suppose, to see what happens.
Does anybody want? Okay, I want to see Sly wants to comment, and then I will wrap up the archival workgroup and move to the next agenda still.
I'm just curious. I've never used GitHub. Do you need to register to collaborate? Because ideally, in my mind, it would work. Archival would work a lot like Wikipedia, where anybody could contribute to tasks, and then maybe those tasks could be peer reviewed by people, and then if you get upvotes and whatnot, your reputation is increased and whatnot. But again, I don't know much about GitHub.
Yeah, dude, I think you should check it out. You'd like it.
Yes, GitHub does require registration. No, it's not going to be like Wikipedia. Wikipedia actually does have barriers to entry. If you try and update an article on Wikipedia, you'll soon find you requiring special knowledge to contribute, and also committees reviewing your content. Similar for this proposal, again, hopefully it's in the proposal. If not, please comment on the proposal. But the proposal is proposing a working meetings where where people learn how to use Gitbook on one side, GitHub and Gitbook, and then actively update it. It's going to be a controlled approach. It's not going to be a free-for-all approach.
Yeah, and I think what you say here reminds me of the conversation happening earlier today between a few of us about the emergence of specialization. And especially I have this phrase in my mind of you can kill a project with an audit. And wonder how this relates to like the initiation of groups and auditing them and kind of helping facilitate the emergence of this specialization that may only be a few people in the community really specializing in that to the extent that they can then share the practices or like onboard the rest of the ambassadors or the program as a whole onto these processes. So I'm very aware that like pulling everyone up takes a lot of energy. And although that may suit some work groups, like the emergence of this specialization of a few people really going down this route to then there's fruits at the end which can be scaled to the whole program kind of thing. I'm very aware of kind of enabling this different ways of specialization or wisdom to emerge.
So with that, we had 4 items for our Archival Workgroup. One is to comment on proposals. I will create a task on that. Then comment on workgroup. By comment on workgroup, what is the difference between comment on proposal and comment on workgroup?
I suppose the only difference I see is that there's the proposal for the work group, which you comment on as a proposal, and then there's the process, which you just said that you think the process is finalized. Tivo, is that your view?
Yeah, no. For this iteration, because like on a sense that we are in a process guild which is not actually looking into now how to progress proposals, because that is like what I want this process guild to be also to compute all the other tasks, and this one proposal is part of a innovation fund process which is a part of all the other things we kind of need to do. So it has that level. So in that sense, I will remove that comment on workgroup, because that I feel like is going to be a general thing because you're gonna find that this is like a family. We move around in the different calls, similar people, and when something pops up in a Archival or and changes are done in one place, it will quite easily replicate to or like reflect to you and your workings. At least that's how it usually has been. Then one thing what was brought up, voting, consensus, consent, decision making. So basically different voting models. And I add this to the agenda for the future to look into. Then what is next step in the process for proposal? Instead of leaving it out open, we actually did answer that and brought out some possible pathways, and which leads us also to next item, which is process modeling workgroup. So same thing for like as an archival workgroup. Yes.
Sorry, is it okay if we just go back a little bit before just running over the let me get up the document. The voting, consensus, consent, decision making, and ambassador program, because I think that for me this is perhaps I'm bringing it to the wrong meeting, but for me this is one of the most important things that's come up several times lately that we really need to work out. So I wonder if we put a note on it, like a note on it for what? Is it to be brought up in the backlog in the next week, or is it to kind of
next week.
work out? Okay, then.
Because all the purple tasks will go into add upcoming activities. Right now, we are in this archival work group. There was this PDF conversion and archival of each meeting session, and that task is kind of belongs under archival work group, as I understand, so we can remove that. And yeah, so it is highly noted. Purple task is something that we should not skip, and it gets activated quite fast. But yeah, there is a danger that if it activates and then we decide to put it in backlog, the backlog is actually somewhere which is going to be a thing which we need to keep eye on. But you get there.
Yeah, I just because I'm a bit concerned about it. I don't want to bring any stress to you guys, but like I see there are decisions gonna have to be made going forward, like both within ambassadors directly and within the community, the wider community. So I just wonder, what's your reflections on what should be done with this topic? What process should happen with this topic, perhaps? I would love some guidance, because I don't know what's needed right now in order to move it forward, or whether I'm just yeah.
Well, from my own experience, I would say this will come up all the time, and always this has been solved on the spot with the resources available. But perhaps somebody else has quick notes about that.
Well, perhaps we can do some asynchronous work on it. I mean, it does list a couple of options. I'm sure these options have benefits and downsides, and it might be that for similar for different situations a different mechanic might be used. Like I think there's quite some stuff we can ideate on in between now and next week's meeting, just to get something going at least, because I do agree it's well yeah it's a recurring theme, and it is very important, and in a way I would like asynchronous progress on it, if that's what it takes.
For funds, if Fly you're interested, I will drop a Miro board, which has a bit of like some thoughts put into like decision making, different not democratic, but like different models of voting, what are the pros and cons. So to kind of build a bit of background knowledge. So next, process modeling workgroup. So as I mentioned, that was another proposal-ish on my report attempt, and this time it was more clear. So I also added it on a calendar. It starts to happen every Wednesday, 15 UTC. And so I will add that time here later. And then I will remove it from this process guild until something bigger comes up. And in these calls, just shared it previously, we are gonna then look into like several things. One thing is process automation ideation. So one thing is that we understand how we follow the process and we can educate each other. But then another thing is the process happens automatically. We are kind of always forgetting that the technology and products and services and the way we are working actually change the way and automate our ability to collect data and use data. So this call will be more focused on this processing and thinking of how to set it up and evaluate and improve. On another topic, which may be the first one, is ambassador onboarding process mapping, which is already started, and now I think it's time to kind of pull off these different assets and understandings and learnings and make a full map out of that. And finally, of course, Miro board as task management is something I'm looking into and see if the process modeling workgroup could be used for that. And that would then create a new model that besides the work to get tasks in. Yeah, any questions about process modeling workgroup? Do you feel like there should be some activity that lingers in process guild more, or anything else that you want to mention?
What's the question exactly? Like, is there something specifically you would like guidance on, or?
Like, yeah, anything you want to add on process modeling workgroup, the things I shared or something that I missed or that you were expecting the process modeling workgroup to do and I didn't mention.
Where it says voting, can you post a link to what Raphael posted? I just posted it in chat in Discord. Where I just documented it. It was just Raphael, so that could be a useful reference for people.
Yeah, there was also one floating around deep funding a while ago, which was
I
maybe
think that might be the same one, actually. If Raphael posted it, it would be deep funding related.
Okay, then another note, the DWork workgroup. So with this, I will move that activity to backlog. I will personally work more on that and bring back this to community when it's a bit more improved and more clarified what is the value for ambassador and why is it aligning with the mission and the things we are doing here. Anybody wants to comment, ask questions regarding this? Then we move to the upcoming activities. What is that? Audit document. Video workgroup structure. Yep, so Roger is not here. Let's see. There is people sharing insights. It's still in to do, but I think this has been addressed. Now the question is, yeah, the video workgroup structure. So that will stay on the backlog, but I think we can finalize this thing. So I'm right now on live trying to remind myself how to do it properly. I'm trying to play around this like Miro board that we can start using these small arrows to navigate the entire board and make it more seamless. Next one, medium account for whitest workgroup. So once again, that was indeed established. And right now it was for the, basically, I think that what happened was Kenichi was like upped to ambassador, and then he was able to just simply use ambassador email to use the medium account. Yeah, I guess that there's any other access things we need to discuss or put into the board to make sure that is tracked. We have Kenichi here representing, so we have some items that we should cover.
No, not exactly. we're good to go. If anything comes up, I'll let you guys know.
Okay, then another one. Introduce Facilitators Collective to share us facilitation best practices. So this was there is a community who helps to facilitate and kind of train people into doing these kinds of setting the stages and listening and progressing towards some goals that the facilitators would like to achieve. And right now, I will put that into backlog because it is something perhaps that education guild also is thinking. I haven't been able to attend these, but they are combining and like having that back in our mind that we do have to start onboarding people to facilitate and leading and kind of having these basic principles of or understanding where we can lead to that when new people are coming up. We have material either and or like ways to scale this skill up. It came from the point of when we discussed about meeting summaries for each participation. So yeah, here it. I forgot to copy paste. So anybody wants to share, or has anybody gone into education guild and here, like where else that these facilitation questions has come up?
Yeah, we're actually looking at that in Strategy Guild, TiVo. And it's one of the reasons I reached out to Vanessa. So last week, we started at best practices for holding virtual work groups, virtual meetings, best practices. And we started a conversation on that, which we're going to follow up tomorrow.
Did have some impact on the town hall. I did not manage to not run over because I let go at the end of the meeting while I shouldn't, but it had some impact.
I would actually think then, do we need to keep eye on that on process quit now? Because it looks like it's happening. The facilitation practices are being developed, built. There is a focus on that. Or should we keep it in a backlog just to remind ourselves that it gets followed through and like something gets implemented? How do you?
Yeah, I would keep it in backlogs so we have a reminder until we've finalized it. It's similar to the governance work group that now has started on the document. It started out, now it's full blown. So however you think is best.
Okay, I added to the backlog then, and then later time we will be then addressing, oh, this actually moved along, and have even a small retrospective perhaps to turn these sticky notes to green. Would prefer if we also have visual representation to see how we onboard new rules. What is that? Finishing updating the latest changes. Okay. So I think, that was, I think that actually we could move to process guild as it now is being established. So I would, I don't know actually. I think it's easier to make it as an agenda item for process guild because it's technically to design a process. So I'm gonna just make a note of that. And then we can, and if it's there as an agenda item, we can actually complete it. So I'm gonna turn this. Yeah, I'm not gonna turn it green right now, else I might misplace it. I'm actually moving wrong item. This. And so yeah, next week let's for activity item, let's check it out. And
So Tiva, what is that? What is the decentralization report design?
yeah, I'm gonna get to that soon. So the next item is okay, setup. Where is that? I clicked the wrong thing. Oh, I don't know. I did something which is recorded now. I don't know how I got confused. So this topic is in the decentralized summit. There was like a report coming out. Let's see where this leads. Okay, they are just back and forth. And from here, I was thinking that perhaps we could use one of the process code sessions to go through the design phase of this report. But I'm not sure, are we too early on here or not? Because if you go through this document, the last part here shows like what to think about when we're designing DAOs. And also, I just thought like, why DAO? Let's think about how have we organized ambassador with these kinds of settings and are they relevant? Sometimes they are not. And if you remember this heat map we did with them a few weeks ago about the like a process code analysis, so something similar I'm looking if we could do for this document itself. Then yeah, basically identifying levels of our complex route, have we identified main needs, have we outlined vital functions, and have we defined structures, communication channels, some mechanism, how we have been implementing these like different options. Are we using these features that decentralization provides us, and yeah, how we are evaluating and auditing this, and does it make sense the way we do it? So yeah, with that agenda, yeah, I was thinking, any thoughts about here? Are we too early? Is it interesting? Should we have a different workshop for that, or a process school is a fine place to have this sentiment? Any thoughts? If there is no thoughts to me, then we won't take this agenda up right now, and we leave it at that. Well, then actually I would crunch to the last item, that is set up ambassadors Miro account. And because that was also brought up, okay, where it goes, because it's already going somewhere. Okay, I keep forgetting. So do we want to start moving these Miro, for example, this bar, process code, and there are deep funding parts too. But then the question is, do we keep the deep funding Miro boards in Swarm, or we move also them to ambassador program? And then, yeah, we start considering that then we need to pay access to specific people to get a license from here. And rest of them we can just use what I would need and Steven would need. And perhaps because everybody cannot unlock their Miro board like assets and do stuff with just the free account.
How much would they be?
It's I think $8 plus the tax, so around $10 per head.
And can we abuse the shared email?
Yeah. Now I'm thinking, I never tried what happens, but maybe we can. Technically, yes, we can just use one account for now, because most likely Yeah, it depends now. But most likely this is like the same thing as in Zoom, and actually even less often used multiple times by same people. Because the only one person has to have the admin control to do stuff. Rest of them can still use their own accounts to play around like we always have been.
Yeah, fair. In a way, if it's for deep funding, they should pay for it. Not us. At the same time, does $8 really make the difference? Probably not. Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, come on, deep funding gets what, like 40%, and we get 0.5. Like, I do agree, $8 isn't that much, but if we're gonna scale, I think it's important to set these processes right first of all, so it's not just assumed.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely true. Honestly, right now I'm not even sure what exactly the deep funding Miro board is and what's on there. And
under deep funding, we have my old archive deep funding resources, and then I don't know what is that. I think that is something Felix has created. And from SingularityNet side, yeah, basically these ambassador nodes we have been using so far.
Mhm.
That are this marketplace thing, the process coil mapping, and now a bunch of stuff that Felix has done. And like the archive podcast ideation.
Well, I guess we can't force them to pay for it, so we could ask if they want to. And I saw Jan sharing my robots before I saw you sharing my robots, so I think it would be done. At the same time, if they don't see the value in it, they won't pay for it, right? But yeah, I fully agree, Fly, on what you said on getting these things sorted out right at the beginning. Otherwise, you create a precedent for, you know, paying for all kind of unrelated stuff, and that will add up really quickly.
I guess that is pretty straightforward activity, and most likely it makes sense that I do it because I have all access to these existing Miro boards. So I will be setting it up for next week, and actually perhaps I'm gonna top it up with one activity I keep forgetting to do, is to set up temporary meeting board so that we can just take this one little window, and when I share the link, everybody don't have to load entire board. That's key.
Is there a limit how many boards an account can have?
So far, I haven't hit the limit, and I have a few hundred.
Sure. Okay, then let's assume there's not, or at least no practical limit.
Well, with this, we did cover all the new tasks, upcoming tasks. There did some new bunch of stuff came aboard, and then when you look at next week, then probably we'll go with the same strategy as we did now. We come from new tasks, we talk about that upcoming activities, and if we iteratively do it enough, we kind of start seeing the flow, how these tasks move on the board. And I myself trying to keep it track on that these arrows kind of help to navigate these things to the meaningful places and create this story of what is happening and how things are progressing.
What happens to the things like touched upon today and not resolved?
All the purple stickies, these will now come action steps that to be discussed. And the entire point of our activities is to, actually, I did forget that part. What are the following decision items and what are the following action items? It was meant to do on all of these. Oh, well, actually, it didn't, and it's all fine. And and basically we iterate through discussions, and we just churn through discussions, and we set up those discussions as we discuss, and also the channel will be our opportunity to asynchronously to change stuff. And when we do reach at like a point that like a conflict of what should be the real topics, that no new activities are added because backlog is so thick and already includes all the things we need to discuss, we come back to this priority voting if we feel that these priorities are no longer also intact. Then we can do this little highlighting again, see where our energy lies, and go with the new iteration, new priority list.
Okay.
So if something's not resolved, Tivo, it stays open.
Yep, these purple tasks keep on grabbing. I'm not yet 100% sure how long this backlog can handle, but on the other vision, that also we're gonna separate it through different goals and work groups, but I haven't gotten to that yet. So it's also in work in progress. Like the way we work has been through meeting to meeting, and meanwhile I've been just been preparing for the next part for based on this part on this session output and some other activities, because all of these tasks are related to things that happen outside the process squid. And then another section of where I spend time is just a little bit clean up and summarizing the session.
Nice. I'm looking at it perhaps through rose-tinted glasses, but I'm a bit worried about this voting stuff, and that if I don't carry on pushing, then nothing's gonna happen as a community. It's great with the documents that you shared. There's quite a few going around which I'm pretty familiar with, but I guess the question for us is, what do we do about something like that? What do we implement, and whether that's something to hash out during process. I don't know.
Yeah,
I would support a session. I mean, I don't know what workshop it should be, whether it's process or, but I would echo what Fly is saying there. It'd be good to keep it in view and to work on it in the next few weeks at some workshop. I'd be happy to,
my point would be to start with governance workshop, because that would include like what voting models we use that can be implemented into framework, that we are looking into a program that leverages many different voting models. Example, and these are all these examples. And then if we run any of those, then we also have a document that says this is how we run this kind of model. And under framework, we may not have used any of these models, or like some of these models we don't use, and just mention that right now our experience is missing, but when there is an opportunity, we will think of something. Because in process, where it starts to make sense is like we want to have this kind of voting model, and in the process it will be hashing out, okay, how does it usually, because there are always nuances, like you can say consensus, but there could be elements to that, and like this, and the context where this voting model is used.
But yeah, obviously you can always infinitely fractal out, but I mean, like on a very basic level, like do we need to delve that deep? And like even so, if we're gonna do this whole thing of like delving into different practices and possibly experimenting and developing a model like, okay, what do we do with the in the interim? Yeah, I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
I do share that sentiment. In a way, to me, it feels like it's definitely part of governance work group, workshop, whatever you call it. But looking at that exact workshop today, it feels like we could spend 3 more weeks before we even get to this question of how exactly do we vote.
Yep.
And at the same time, looking at that list, like consent, consensus, or what was the third one? Just basic voting, I think. Yeah. Like it does put the question, like, do we need to fully define every possible setting for where we can be having this decision on how to vote, and like, do we need to predefine that? Because in a way, I feel like, you know, if in some discussion, if you sense that there is consensus, or there might be consensus, and you check for it, and everybody agrees on a point, well, that kind of solves it.
Yeah, perhaps a closing thought then for a collective mind. The first thing we need to have is a thing we want to decide upon. And let's say, do we need to appoint Mikasa to be ambassador right now? Then the question is it then urgent? If it's not, then it moves to usually the democratic, but it has like, is it set of options to be decided on? Clear. If it's yes, then you can use democratic, and it has its pros and cons and why it's chosen. If it's no, then perhaps the second best option would be the consensus. And so that's like one trajectory. You kind of switch from model to model based on, can the team choose facts? Are the consequences of a decision very predictable? Or alternatively, if this is urgent, then it's going to kind of levels into does the implementation impact a large number of people, or can you delay the decision making? And if there is some obstructs that does the decision impact a large number of people, and it doesn't, then it sometimes could be resolved with a bit of like, yeah, delegation or autocratic, where you just go for it, or stochastic.
But then I guess a model like this would then the high level decision would be like, do we going forward use this model? And for that personally, right now I don't have enough information. I'm not trying to put it like that. Yeah. I do think this is quite something to absorb, right? I mean, I see a lot of terms I recognize, and I know what they mean and how it would work in practice. But I'm not quite sure if I would right now commit to fully using this system. Always.
And this is a lot of exhaustive decision making also, because if you have to make a decision, what kind of decision you're gonna model you're gonna use, that's also a thing that can weigh us down.
So then perhaps a flight to not to put you on the spot, but in a way to get a bit more clarification. What specifically are you looking for? Like, are you looking to lock into a model and then simply apply that to all situations? Or, I mean, saying that out loud kind of makes me wonder how realistic that would be. But probably not really. But like, what kind of outcome would you be looking for?
Like a clear decision-making process, like defined, okay, for instance, if we have a vote, or if there's a decision to be made, who votes? Is it the ambassadors? Is it all the community? Is it just the people in the meeting? Is that enough? There's like stuff I don't want to talk about, I don't want to start giving examples of stuff and decisions that need to be made, but I just see that there are lots of decisions that need to be made right now, and it's too tired in the day. It's too late in the day for me to like regurgitate all of them, but
That's fair. That's fair.
I see, yeah, I see decisions needing to be made, and yeah, like people being cautious or yeah, it's something I just think we need to resolve, and yeah, that's it.
And I would say in the best case scenario, this would be part of the governance framework. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it seems like the governance framework won't be finalized in the coming short term.
Well, what do we do about
think-
things in the short term?
Yeah,
Decisions
in the
made?
short term, I mean, just my view is that enable anonymous voting and just use online web polls or something like that, because there's I hear what you're saying, Fly. There's like an immediate need to make decisions, and there's a whole you can make that as complicated or as flexible as you want, but I suppose there's the kind of pragmatic question of how do we make decisions with the resources that we have. Yeah. So I mean, my only thing would be to encourage anonymous voting, but apart from that, I think you could use online polls, Zoom polls, that kind of thing. I know Zoom polls not necessarily anonymous, by the way.
Well, it's actually one of the backlog stickies mentions create a summon platform demo, I think, which is intended to figure out how usable that, if it's like practical to use that for anonymous voting. I think Roger was taking initiative on that, so that might take a couple more days to resolve.
On one small positive note and a bit of negative too, this Maro board integration has been more difficult. Like now I finally figured out where are the X and Y position when you look at the sticky notes, and it's not as you would have not guessed that they are in the middle of sticky note and of the edges, and that kind of threw off my calculations. But now, as I have this information, the next steps is to start like scaling it up, and once I get the object identified correctly, relation to each other, are they on top of each other or not, we can then quite easily, I think, implement all the data we have collected as contributors. We can now start using them as weights. What is the result? I have no clue, but then we can collectively see what happens when we apply weights based on what the information we have collected. And then we can play around it. But that's a story for another week. Thanks for joining to the Process Squad. Getting some tasks moved along, agreed on what's happening, creating new activities for upcoming us, and keeping this space alive.
Thanks a lot for hosting.